Tonight, an extended truce. The last-minute ceasefire agreement as negotiators work to free more hostages held by Hamas. Plus,
this amount of groceries, $100.
Inflation in America. And
there is no country in the world where it is conceivable that a man of my origins could be standing here next to the President of the United States.
The author of American Foreign Policy, Henry Kissinger, dead at 100 years old. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
A last-minute deal extends an Israel-Hamas truce for a 7th day. Good evening, I'm Jenna Browder.
And from the CBN studio in Washington, D.C., I'm John Jessup. Well, another day, another extension of a shaky pause in the Israel-Hamas war, with more hostages held by the terror group now for 54 days set for release.
The temporary ceasefire marred by a spat of violence in Israel. Hamas is claiming responsibility for a shooting at a bus stop in Jerusalem, killing at least 3 people and injuring 6 others. 2 Israeli women held hostage were freed today, with more to follow. The terror group releasing more than 100 hostages at a rate of about 10 a day in exchange for some 210 Palestinian prisoners. Israel, vowing to resume the war to end Hamas, is facing pressure for a shift in strategy as the war turns to southern Gaza. Today at the White House, the U.S. said civilians in southern Gaza should be protected.
We have been very consistent and clear with our Israeli counterparts that we do not support a move to the south unless or until they have adequately accounted for the protection of innocent human life, civilian life, in southern Gaza, with the understanding that there's a whole heck of a lot more innocent civilians in southern Gaza than there were a week or 2 ago.
Well, more than 300,000 IDF reservists have been activated to serve in the war, leaving families and jobs to serve on the front lines. The exodus is hitting Israeli farms especially hard. Many have lost a significant amount of the workforce after being called up. Well, to show solidarity with Israel, a group of American Cowboys are stepping in, paying their own way to the Holy Land to help bring much-needed manpower back to the workforce.
The farmers here are suffering. Obviously, these guys are guys we're helping. So the Cowboys were on their way to come help, and somebody caught them on the way in and took a picture, and it went totally viral. So now I don't think there's an Israeli in the country that doesn't know about the Cowboys. But literally, we're staying to task. We've got farms. We're picking zucchini here right now. If we don't pick these things, they're rot, right? We have to pick them.
Most of the Cowboys plan to stay for at least a month, saying they believe God has given this land to the Jewish people, so they're there to help maintain it.
Todd Lamere is Vice President of Government Relations at CityServe International, another group working to help Israel's farmers, and he joins us now. Todd, welcome. So CityServe International is bringing a group of farmers from one Israeli community to the United States. We understand the goal is to raise awareness and money. Tell us about that, Todd, and the dire situation these farmers face.
Jenna and John, it's good to be with you, and really applaud what the Cowboys have done, because that's really what CityServe has taken on, along with several partners, National Faith Advisory Board, Apollo White Ministries, Intercessors for America, really just to bring the Christian community to understand that the war has consequences in the farmlands that the Cowboys are talking about in the Valley of Eshcol, the biblical valley. That's the breadbasket of Israel, and we want to bring not just 1 or 2, but we want to create a whole atmosphere of serving projects to help these farmers, the 300,000 plus that have been called up. Can't pick the farms. The Thai workers have all been sent home, and it's like you said on your last clip, the fruits is dying on the vine.
You mentioned the Valley of Eshcol, which is known as the breadbasket of Israel. How has this made it so difficult for, how has the fighting rather made it difficult for Israel to just feed its people?
Well, the landscape there, it is right on the Gaza border, and people are afraid. You take the community that we have adopted, En Abzur, which is a biblical town connected with the story of Ziklag. 90% of their people have left the region. They're 3 hours away in the city of Eilat. You take the kibbutzes that were decimated, kibbutz Nir Oz and Be'eri. There's no one living there, and there's no one taking care of the farms, the crops. There's just a handful of people who are just trying to make it, and people are scared to go back, obviously, because of the proximity to Gaza.
Yeah. Todd, for people watching, how can Americans help the situation?
First and foremost is pray, and we don't want to take that lightly, but to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, to pray for the protection of the people of Israel, and not to get weary in doing what's right, as Galatians says. And that really is to stay and to stick and to stand with Israel. If you're going to fall on any side, you fall on the side of God's people, you fall on the side of Israel. So those are two things. So to give support through prayer, give support through their sovereignty, and then to give, whether it's through CityServe.us, or there are a number of great organizations out there that are doing incredible work. But I would say, and then lastly, pray, give, go. That's probably it right there. And they need our tourism money as well.
All right, Todd Lamere with CityServe International, we thank you for your time and what you're doing in Israel.
Thank you so much, John and Jenna. Good to be with you.
Likewise. Well, turning to the U.S. economy, new Commerce Department data out today shows cooling inflation. The White House labels economic improvements like this as Bidenomics, a word used to bolster re-election efforts.
But with prices still 3% higher than this time last year, studies show many voters aren't buying the Bidenomics pitch. CBN's Charlene Aaron reports.
For more than a year, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates in an effort to lower inflation. Prices are still high, however, especially when it comes to basic necessities like groceries. With a growing number of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, many are struggling to make ends meet.
About $500 a week, if not more.
$500 a week to feed your family?
Yes.
In May, when food prices reached 4.7% higher than the year before, some took to social media to air their frustration.
This amount of groceries, $100.
Amber Bergeron of Dutchtown, Louisiana, is a stay-at-home mother of 4. Her husband works as a tankerman in the oil field. She tells CBN News how tough it is trying to keep up with rising monthly expenses.
Honestly, I don't know if it gets any worse, how much longer we'll be able to keep our head above water.
Amber is not alone. The standard of living for Americans has dropped in the last 2 to 3 years. And according to this recent survey, 52% of adults said they have felt more financially stressed since before the pandemic in 2020. Reasons for this economic stress include sticker shock for everyday goods and services. For example, car prices are much higher than just a few years ago, and median home prices are up 31% since 2020. And because of these soaring prices, 61% of Americans, including those bringing in $150,000 a year, live paycheck to paycheck. Dan Darling, director of the faith-based Land Center for Cultural Engagement, suggests lawmakers fight inflation as a family value.
It's affecting their families. Mom has to work more. Kids are left by themselves more because parents are working, so they're on screens more. There's all sorts of these things, pressures that I think people at the top don't really see.
Local food banks are also feeling the impact.
Our dollar doesn't stretch as far as it used to, and at the same time, we're seeing more demand from the people who need our services.
Chris Tan of the Food Bank of Southeastern Virginia and Eastern Shore says demand is higher today than when COVID sent the economy reeling.
They're seeing increases of 50 to 60% from the height of the pandemic. And so they're serving, some of them will serve 2 times as many people as they did the last year and 3 times as many people as they did in 2019.
To cope, a growing number of Americans are turning to plastic. According to Quicken, 46% of consumers making more than $100,000 a year are more dependent on their credit cards than ever before, and about a third say they can't afford to pay off their balances by the end of the year. Financial planner Robin Tull suggests ways to manage and save.
Have a spending plan. You have to look at things that you're spending money on, and is it that important? You look at subscriptions, you look at streaming. There's so many things. If you don't know where you're spending it, you can't really cut back. So you need to look at those things. Maybe you don't have to eat out as much.
Meanwhile, as inflation seems to be cooling, many say government policies remain out of touch with reality and the pain families are facing.
I just would like to know where and when it started easing up, because I would love to be able to feel that as well. I just feel like myself and quite a few other Americans feel like we've been abandoned and just left to drown.
Inflation easing doesn't mean that the prices are going back down to where they were 2 years ago. What it means is they're not going up as fast. Well, that's not much solace to people who are trying to put their grocery bills together and pay their utilities and do all these things. We need to have economic policies that strengthen the family and support the family so that these pressures don't pull them apart.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thank you, Charlene. Joining us now is Washington Bureau Chief and Senior Economic Analyst for Bankrate, Mr. Mark Hamrick. Mark, thanks for joining us. So we just saw Charlene's report. Many people struggling. I think that statistic that just really stood out to me was 52% feel more financially stressed now than they did during COVID, despite the fact that personal income and personal spending are up. So I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what most Americans want to know is what that last lady in Charlene's package just said is how much longer before prices begin to fall?
John, it's a key question, and our bank rate surveys, as well as those conducted by other organizations or entities, do show that the cost of inflation really is the stress that is causing, weighing on the minds as well as the pocketbooks of Americans. And it may be, let's say, not much solace for Americans that inflation is now regarded to have peaked, because it does remain elevated, and we know that most prices are still higher than they were before the pandemic. I think the key problem, and very often a misconception here, is that at this point in where we stand with the economy, there really are not many policy responses that can be taken among elected officials. This job really now is job one for the Federal Reserve, which began raising interest rates in March of last year and is seeing some signs of progress in its mission towards stable prices.
Mark, I'd like to get your thoughts on the next Fed policy meeting. Reading the tea leaves, does it look like the Fed will leave interest rates in place?
Of course, as you know, John and Jenna, the Fed has now been standing pat at its previous two meetings, and that very much is the widespread expectation for the foreseeable future, meaning the Fed is finished raising interest rates. And let's remember, having moved its benchmark rate up to 5 and let's say 5.4%, as inflation comes down, that policy rate actually becomes more restrictive. So many investors are betting the Fed could be cutting rates next year.
On the financial side, Mark, consumers clearly are paying the price, higher prices. But as we turn to the 2024 election cycle, is there a political price to pay for high inflation? And I know you just mentioned there's a difference between elected officials and policy officials.
Well, that remains to be seen, John, because then you have to ask the question, which of the candidates, and at this point we think we know who they may be, would be better prepared to deal with those issues, and how much do Americans prioritize the economy and inflation over the bevy of many other issues? And I think that will be a question yet to be answered. We probably will have an opportunity to talk about it in the next year.
I have a feeling that will happen. To employment, Mark, initial jobless claims rebounded last week. What does that mean for the overall picture of the job market?
You know, new claims remain low, but the continuing claims, meaning the ongoing process of people staying on unemployment, is now at the highest level in 2 years. The job market softening, the unemployment rate at 3.9%. That's up 0.5% over the past 6 or so months.
All right, Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. Mark, always good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
The latest from the campaign trail and the 2024 race for the White House, just 2 minutes away. Welcome back. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley is still benefiting from a major financial boost in her primary bid against Donald Trump and the other candidates.
That's right. Americans for Prosperity, part of the powerful Koch network, formally endorsed Haley's campaign this week in a major surprise to rival candidate Ron DeSantis.
After you, Jenna, go ahead.
CBN Washington correspondent Hillary Powell is following the story. Hillary, how does this development change the horse race?
Well, Jenna, support for this political advocacy group founded by the billionaire Koch brothers carries a lot of weight, and really that's not all. Another group is moving to launch a super PAC aimed at swinging independent voters to support the former governor.
In every poll, we beat Biden by 10 to 13 points.
A lead GOP presidential hopeful Nikki Haley hopes will grow with the backing this week from the powerful Koch network, which has already raised $70 million. Insisting in a statement, Nikki Haley at the top of the ticket would boost candidates up and down the ballot, winning the key independent and moderate voters that Trump has no chance to win. Add to that the effort for a new super PAC aimed at swaying independent voters over to Haley's presidential bid. It will focus on growing her ground game in New Hampshire's first in the nation primary, where about 40% of registered voters are undeclared.
And what that means is bodies, door knockers, people touting her, getting them to her events, and ultimately promoting her in getting them to caucus for her on January 15th.
As of this month, Trump leads Biden by 2.6 percentage points nationally and the Real Clear Politics average. This is Trump's largest lead ever tracked by the group. The former president ahead 40 points in some polls, even after skipping the debates and facing multiple criminal cases.
All across America, instead of exporting jobs, companies, both foreign and domestic, are creating jobs here in America and exporting American-made products.
As the president tries to tout job creation and other benefits from his Inflation Reduction Act, a Gallup poll shows his job approval rating remains at 37%, tying a personal low. Okay, also low are approval ratings for the president's handling of foreign relations. Gallup poll shows 32% each approve of his handling of the economy, of foreign affairs, and of the situation between Israelis and Palestinians.
Hillary, also big on the political stage tonight, a rare debate between two governors.
That's right. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom are set to face off in a red versus blue state debate. Now, they're going to be talking about a lot of topics: inflation, crime, also the border, and the debate performance for both further speculation, about their political futures.
This is a great opportunity for Ron DeSantis. I mean, if you think about it, he's on Fox News, on a Sean Hannity show, and he's able to outline conservative principles. So, I mean, you can, in a way, you can kind of call this a commercial for Ron DeSantis. I mean, I think this is his way of saying and playing to a conservative audience to say, these are my conservative bona fides, in essence, make the case as to why he will be the best president to take over the conservative mantle. The problem is he's got a numbers problem. He's got a bit of a charisma problem.
Okay, now eyes will also be on Newsom as there's a possible lots of talk and speculation about him eyeing a Democratic presidential run. But David says he's not so sure about that.
I don't see any upshot for Gavin Newsom here. I mean, the only upshot would be that he gets in front of more of a conservative, maybe a potential independent audience. So if Biden ends up not running, that Gavin Newsom is, in essence, been introduced a little bit to this conservative, moderate, independent audience.
Now, as for the Biden campaign, they tell ABC News that they welcome Newsom's support and that he is going to be making the president's case for a 2024 bid. John, Jenna.
All right, Hillary Powell, thank you very much. Well, a diplomat who dominated foreign policy up next. A look at the life and legacy of Henry Kissinger. Dr. Henry Kissinger, the influential and controversial architect of American foreign policy, has died at the age of 100. In his book, American Foreign Policy, the longtime diplomat wrote, quote, "The test of a statesman is the permanence of international structure under stress." That theory tested across the decades, from his shuttle diplomacy in the Middle East that ushered in an end to the Yom Kippur War to a policy of détente with the Soviet Union. Kissinger, who died Wednesday, leaves a complicated legacy, playing a key role in the U.S. carpet bombing of Cambodia during the Vietnam War that killed thousands of civilians, later winning the Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating talks that ended that same war. Before he was a consultant to presidents, the foreign affairs expert was a Jewish refugee who fled Nazi Germany with his family in 1938.
There is no country in the world where it is conceivable that a man of my origins could be standing here next to the President of the United States.
Secretary of State to Presidents Nixon and Ford, now remembered as an, quote, old friend by China after engineering a historic presidential visit that led to a reopening of the country.
The United Nations Annual Climate Summit kicks off 2 weeks of meetings today in the Persian Gulf's United Arab Emirates. President Biden not slated to attend, although Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Dubai this weekend in his place. There she'll meet with other world leaders, all working to find some sort of consensus on how to address climate change. Pope Francis had been scheduled to attend the United Nations Summit, but had to pull out last minute as he recovers from the flu.
A new vision for a life-changing movie, an update on the Jesus film. Next. Finally tonight, an evangelistic tool that's been winning people to Christ across the globe since 1979 is moving into a new era.
That's right, Jenna. It's simply known as the Jesus film, and it's believed to have been seen by billions of people across the planet. Now the Jesus Film Project is announcing the continuation of that legacy. Tonight at the Washington Museum of the Bible, producers will unveil their new vision for the film. The goal is to reach a new and younger generation with the good news of Jesus Christ. In Washington area, Pastor David Platt, who I believe is still the pastor of McLean Bible Church, will help lead the big unveiling in just about an hour from the broadcast, this broadcast time. And you can watch that live stream. It is at jesusfilm.org. And that film, Jenna, has just made quite an impact over its decades of existence.
Yeah, and it stood the test of time.
Yep.
Big congratulations to them.
Yep. Thanks so much for watching.
Have a great night.